They say the fire beneath this town has been burning for more than 60 years. No explosion, no war, no natural disaster. Just a slow, silent fire, deep beneath the earth, that refused to die. It began with smoke curling through cracks in the pavement. Then came the heat, the smell of sulfur, and the sound of the ground itself breathing. This isn't a legend. It's a real place. A ghost town swallowed by its own creation. Its name is Centralia. Centralia, Pennsylvania, a small mining town founded in the 1850s. A church, a few shops, a gas station, and fewer than 150 people who lived by the rhythm of the mines. Coal was everything: work, warmth, identity. Beneath their feet stretched a labyrinth of tunnels and seams, veins of black rock that had fed generations. The town literally stood above its fuel. For decades, that coal was a blessing. Men went underground long before dawn and returned at dusk, faces streaked with soot and hands calloused by shovel and pick. Neighborhoods were built close to one another, porches facing porches, and the sound of children playing drifted over yards where the air tasted faintly of iron. People trusted the ground. They had for 100 years. Then a small, ordinary decision changed everything. In May 1962, town officials set a pile of trash on fire in an old pit to clear it ahead of Memorial Day. The fire, expected to die out, slipped into a crevice and into the hidden coal seam beneath. That single ember found oxygen and a path. Coal doesn't explode like gasoline. It smolders. It crawls. It consumes slowly, quietly, eating away at its surroundings as if the earth itself had turned to embers. At first, nobody noticed. No dramatic flames licked houses. No sirens filled the streets. But underground, the fire spread. Months passed before the surface began to betray the secret below. Steam rose from small cracks in pavement. Snow melted in perfect circles despite winter temperatures. Basements warmed with an inexplicable heat. The smell, metallic, sweet, sulfurous, became part of daily life. People complained of headaches, nausea, a faintness that sometimes stole breath mid-sentence. Pets vanished. Birds dropped from trees. Old-timers said they had seen smoke before in abandoned pits, and they told themselves this was the same. Temporary, manageable. But the smoke had found new routes. It had slipped into a network of tunnels and turned them into conduits for an invisible, unstoppable ember. By 1969, even the cemetery smoked. Gravestones steamed in the cold, and the earth there seemed to exhale. Locals made jokes or nervy superstitions about restless souls, stories to make sense of a reality that had no good sense. Scientists, however, saw a different pattern. An underground inferno moving inexorably toward the surface. Heat was one thing. The invisible killers were another. Carbon monoxide seeped through floors and up through cracks in the foundation. Devices that couldn't be seen on a meter were taking people's oxygen. Households reported dizzy spells and fainting. Pets dropped lifeless in yards. Children came home from school with headaches that subsided once they left town. When a sinkhole opened without warning near a playground, the town began to look less like a place to raise a family, and more like a place about to be erased. Authorities tried to fight the fire. They dug trenches and injected water. They pumped concrete into tunnels and poured sand into suspected channels. They capped vents and sealed openings. They drilled boreholes to gauge temperatures and mapped the subterranean paths of the blaze. Each attempt revealed a terrifying truth. The fire was not localized. It had spread through a complex seam system, moving into voids, feeding on coal far beyond the original spot. Some seams were isolated, others linked by fractures and old mine workings. The engineering solutions that might work for a surface fire were useless against a subterranean consumer that needed only tiny amounts of oxygen and a supply of carbon to keep burning. Danger became visible in the oddest ways. In winter, footprints sank into steam-warmed patches of snow. In summer, sidewalks warped and bubbled. Potholes gaped and reformed where the ground collapsed into hidden voids. The town's skin thinned. On cold mornings, the air above certain lots shimmered. At night, travelers passing by said they could see columns of smoke rising, thin as breath, from the earth. Then came a day that no one would forget. On Valentine's Day, 1981, 12-year-old Todd Domboski was walking across his grandmother's backyard when the ground gave way beneath him. A sinkhole opened, jagged, black, and frighteningly deep. Todd dropped. The hole belched smoke, and the air inside it seared. It was a throat into fire itself. He was pulled out by sheer luck and strength, a near miss that read like a warning. The underground blaze had become a public danger. The country finally looked up. The science teams confirmed the worst fears. Temperatures in certain tunnels reached staggering degrees. In places, they measured hundreds of Celsius. The fire had created pathways, collapsed roofs, and heated the soil above to levels that could sterilize basements and warp foundations. Worse, the combustion could continue for centuries. Coal seams, once ignited and exposed to oxygen through fractured rock or old workings, will smolder as long as fuel and oxygen exist. Estimates varied, but some models forecast the fire could burn for hundreds of years. The economics were clear and cruel. Extinguishing the fire would require untold sums, pumping water into miles of seams, excavating, sealing, and rebuilding. The price tag exceeded national and local budgets. It was a cold calculation rather than a moral choice. The government acted with what it had: buyouts, condemnation, and evacuation orders. Families were offered compensation to leave. Some took the money and left grieving, others refused. For some, Centralia was more than a map dot. It was family memory, the place of births and funerals, the worn porches and the church chimes. "The fire is part of our town now," an old resident told a reporter. "We were born here. We'll die here." Gradually, the town emptied. Houses were demolished. Streets were torn up or closed. Schools shuttered. Mail stopped coming. The zip code vanished. Centralia ceased to be an address on most modern maps. What remained were memories, a handful of stubborn residents, and a landscape more ghostly than any fiction could conjure. The most visible relic became Route 61, the old highway stretching through the area, later nicknamed Graffiti Highway. Where the asphalt would usually be a monotonous gray, artists, visitors, and vandals left color, spray paint declarations, names, dates, images. Bright pigments clashed with the muted tones of smoke-streaked grass and blackened tree trunks. People came to see what was left, to take photographs, to feel the warmth radiating from the ground beneath their feet. The painted road was a shrine of curiosity and a memorial of loss. But the fire never stopped. Visitors who knelt in certain spots could feel heat rising through the soil. Steam still curled from fissures. At night, some described an eerie glow where the earth itself seemed to breathe. Not flame licking the surface, but a deep ember's glow that suggested combustion hidden in the rock. Tests showed volatile gases still moved through fractures and that carbon monoxide pockets could form unexpectedly. It remained a hazard. Centralia's story rippled beyond its fences. Similar underground fires burn around the world. In China, coal seam fires have raged for decades, consuming entire hillsides and forcing villages to move. In India, natural coal seam fires have been burning for centuries in places where the seams outcrop at the surface. In Australia, underground coal and peat fires have also left scars. The common thread is the same. A resource that once fed society can, given certain conditions, become a slow, adaptive destroyer. These fires are not dramatic in the cinematic sense. They don't light up the sky with towering flames, but their persistence makes them more insidious. They outlast policies and lifetimes. They quietly change the ground beneath communities and the economic calculus of entire regions. Scientifically, the problem is complicated. Coal, trapped in seams and old workings, will combust when heat, oxygen, and fuel meet. Some fires start from lightning strikes or spontaneous combustion in spoil piles. Others begin with human acts like the trash burn in Centralia. Once ignited, trenching or water alone often won't reach the heart of a burning seam. The heat bakes the surrounding rock and creates pathways for gas movement. The usual tools of firefighting, water, smothering, isolation, are blunt in the face of a three-dimensional underground network. Attempts to fill voids with grout or clay, to flood tunnels, or to seal shafts have limited success if the fire has multiple outlets and supply routes. In short, the subterranean environment can give fire room to breathe and hide, while human interventions struggle to reach the parts that matter. There were human lessons, too. The evacuation broke up communities. Families scattered to new towns and new lives, but a few chose to remain or to return, despite legal battles and compensation offers. Their choices were often framed in terms of identity, stubbornness, or a refusal to be written out of the land where ancestors had lived and worked. Those who stayed spoke of a landscape that haunted them and, strangely, of a stubborn beauty in the ruined streets and resilient trees. The land, they said, carried memory, charred and fragile, but undeniable. Centralia's story has also entered culture. Books, documentaries, urban legends, and films have borrowed its imagery. The smoking fields, the empty homes, the road of painted asphalt. Yet the facts are stranger than any fiction. It is not a moral tale about greed or punishment so much as a cautionary story about complexity and consequence. We built societies on resources that seemed tame and manageable. We assumed control. In Centralia, that assumption eroded. If you stand on the cracked earth there today, you can still feel warmth through the soles of your shoes. The air carries a metallic tang. Steam curls like a ghostly mist from holes the size of wells. You might walk along the dead street, where porches used to face one another, and hear only the wind and a distant, almost mechanical hiss. The sound of a fire kept secret by rock and time. It is an unsettling silence, full of stories. The fire beneath Centralia still burns. It will probably burn long after the names on its old mailboxes fade. It is a scar, a slow wound on the landscape, an example of what happens when a resource outlives its usefulness to us and continues to consume on its own terms. The town stands as a quiet warning. Some dangers grow quietly, without spectacle, patiently outliving generations until only the earth remembers. If this mystery kept you watching, leave a like, share your theory in the comments, and subscribe, because the next story is already waiting beneath the surface.